It's part of a kid education story that was a coyote turning story. It was kind of a long turning story, and I don't think I probably should tell it here. I consider it the cut-up version of Dante and the Seven Sins of Man. I mean, that might have fit here, but I'm going to try to tell you another story. And I'm going to start talking a lot of English, and eventually I'll start gradually going into Karuk, and then after a while I'll just speak Karuk towards the end. That's kind of how the story evolves. And so it began. This was a long time ago, a time before, a time when everything walked on the earth, a time before human beings, before we turned into what it is today. And in this story, we teach about marriage and traditional roles, and this is a story kind of about marriage. And so, Chikpakpa. Okay, Chikpakpa. Now this is the Chikpakpa was a Yanif Dihon. So the translation of Yanif Dihon was a big, buff, good-looking dude. And he's also a bachelor. All in one word. So he was a young Nifty Hon, and anyway, and sometimes, people, they just don't like these young, good-looking people, just to be running around there, free and carefree, so everyone's always just wanting to marry them off and making sure they, find an appropriate, mate and whatnot. So they just couldn't leave Chikpakpa alone. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the marriage things in Karuk way. Well, and there was several ways to get married in the Karuk way, and one was that a young man or a person, a male person, would come to one of the ceremonies and they'd watch the young eligible women in their dancing ceremonies, in their coming out dances and things like that, and say, oh, this is a beautiful girl, I want to marry her, and they started an application process. And then another would be, they would go up to the family and they would offer appropriate bride price, the regalia, the Indian, Natalia, all that, and they the other tribes where we live, is the women would just decide, well, they would choose who they wanted to marry, and then they would offer a bride price for the man, or what we call it, an offer of a dowry or whatever. They would purchase their husband. So this guy, this chick-fuck, but he just wasn't going around looking for a wife, so he had a lot of marriage applicants, and so that's where it begins. Chick-fuck, we won't see, goes chick-fuck, get up. Chishon, get up. Oh, someone has come to marry you. Chick-fuck will be, and so chick-fuck, what he said, oh, what kind of a dress is she wearing? Oh, Yakuzba. Oh, I didn't break my throat. Oh, Yakuzba, oh, what about you got it? She's wearing a dress made out of nothing but abalone. Chick-fuck will be, oh, Khadat. He said, no way, send her home. Pretty soon, it was a knocking at the door, and won't see, but chick-fuck, won't see, they said, wake up, chick-fuck, wake up. They said, oh, get up, someone's coming to you. Chick-fuck will be, oh, he said, what kind of a dress is she wearing? Oh, Achios. She's wearing a dress and it's just nothing but pine nuts. Chick-fuck will be, oh, Chada. He said, no way, just send her home. And he said, kukum. Chick-fuck, but pretty soon he heard the same thing. He said, chick-fuck, wake up. Someone's going to know you, chick-fuck will be. It's quiet. There was nothing but juniper berries. And the dress was nothing but a lot of juniper berries. Cutting house, upi, chick-fuck, chimamon sipat, chick-fuck upi, mayapos, cold mayapos, Khanbat. The cold mayapos, unang tie, khumbat. The whole dress was nothing but clamshells. Chick-fuck upi, chimitlan. And so a lot of these girls came and kept sending them away all day long. Let me tell you a little bit more about the marriage, and the Kedik marriage. Now, the word for wife is Kiroha, which means the one who cooks. And the word for husband is Awan, which means the one who eats. Haskari upi, chick-fuck, wait, whoa, sipa, akamay, burayam, asitawan, burayam, fatmayapos, chick-fuck upi, fatmayapos, mayapos, kunishapos, kusariman, oh, they go, chick-fuck, you better get up this time. You've got to get up. There's this girl, this woman here, and she is beautiful. And she has this beautiful red dress on, and oh, it's just nothing but red juniper berry. Red patron berries. Hashipakobi. Because, okay, let her come in. I'm hungry anyway. So let me tell you a little more about the marriage things with the cakes. Well, with the cakes, one way of showing what an industrious woman you are, one way of showing how good of a wife you're going to be is to display your culinary skills. And the most difficult thing to make is a corn soup. because acorn soup is the acorns are very, very bitter, and you have to go through a real long process, and you have to be just a really good acorn soup maker to make it taste nice. So he said, well, let her come in because I'm hungry. So she goes through the process of making the acorn soup. And it takes a long time, but maybe the half of it might have been done, but they have to, they pound the acorns and they sift them and they just get the nice soft and then they make the flour and then they sift that and then they make they make this dough. And this dough is made when they pour the water through the acorn soup, and cleanse it and make it take all the bitter tannic acid out. And then they get the hot rocks and they put it in a big basket bowl. Because see, we didn't have pots and pottery and stuff, and you can't really put your basket in the fire, so you put the rocks in the basket and then you stir it and cook that way. Chipapa, well, they got chipapa with the chimney, Kaskari, Nishpa, Sikawan, Karu, good. And so, anyway, they went through this whole thing and they started to get tired. And begin to get dark. Well, the Indians there, they don't like traveling at night. It's just not a good thing to travel at night, and they have a lot of reasons why they want to, but they usually say, well, I'm not going to travel at night, because the Indian devils will be out there or something. So, they want to stay indoors at night, so they had to spend the night. So the men, they go to sleep out in their sweat houses, and then the girl, she had to sleep there in the big living house alone. And she put her dress up on the post there. The houses were redwood plank houses, and you went, stepped right in through a round door. And they were down a little bit under the ground. And so, as she was asleep, and everyone went to sleep, she so all through that night, Chick-Papa kept on thinking, he goes, oh, that woman in the red dress. Oh, that woman in the red dress. Pretty soon she's thinking, oh, that red dress. That red dress. So in the middle of the night, he came in and he snuck in there, and he wanted to look at that red dress that was hanging up there by the door. And so pretty soon he wanted to taste one of those berries, so he tasted a berry. And he said, oh, that tastes pretty good. And he started just smacking around, just making a lot of noise. And the juice from the berries, it just started dribbling down his face and dribbling down his chest. And he was smacking around. And she woke up and said, Makayum. She said, who is it? And so he turned into a bird and he flew away. And to this day, he's still around here, and they call him Robin Redbreast.
We'll see more presentations from Wordpath's 5th annual celebration of Oklahoma, Indian language and culture on upcoming shows. Now, for a segment that will probably become a frequent feature on the Wordpath show, it's called The Week at Wordpath. In this section, you'll hear about what goes on at the Intertribal Wordpath Society, which produces this show, what kind of inquiries we get from the public, announcements, upcoming projects, and so forth. I hope you find it interesting and useful. For this week, I'd like to mention that the Wordpath Society and the Cause of Oklahoma Indian Languages were featured in the New York Times on November 18th. I would show you, but it's a very small article. It was in this edition, November 18th, in a section called Giving on the inside. we hope that it may lead to some increased donations for our work. I've heard there are lots of Indians in New York, a surprising number in New York City. And it also appeared in the national edition, which goes all over the country, and it was on the internet. This may still be available on the internet if you go to, I think it's nytimes.com. You might be able to still find it there, an article about the Intertribal Wordpath Society. And speaking of articles, there was one in the Newark Star-Ledger, which is a newspaper in Newark, New Jersey, recently about the Delaware language. The Wordpath Society gave some guidance to the writer in his research, but the article mostly quotes Delawares, both from the Bartlesville Delaware tribe in Oklahoma, and also quotes from several members of a group in Ontario who speak a very closely related language or dialect called Munsee. It's an excellent and very interesting article, and I recommend it to you. It can be read online at http://www.nj.com/specialprojects/Lenape. One more publication I wanted to mention, and that's Scientific American. In their August issue, there was an article about native language preservation, which unfortunately I have not been able to read yet. It was highly recommended to me by a friend who is pretty aware about Indian language issues. I tried to get it at the Norman Public Library twice so far, and I haven't been able to find it on any of the shelves or tables or anywhere, so I hope someone hasn't made off with it. But if you can get your hands on that, it might be an interesting read too. That's Scientific American, August 2002 issue. Now, more locally, this is an interesting project that we've been up to just in the last week or two at the Wordpath Society. The Wordpath Society has been busy setting up a listserv for Oklahoma Indian languages called Talk Indian Oklahoma. It's intended for language workers and Indian people who are interested in language issues in Oklahoma, but is open to anyone who's interested in the subject matter. A listserv, if you don't know it, is a kind of network that you can subscribe to on your computer. And subscribing allows you to post messages that are then emailed to all the other subscribers on the list. It's a good way to network because you have a kind of electronic community that you can go to if you have a question about Oklahoma Indian languages, or if you'd like to be able to hear announcements that are broadcast to the group, or if you'd like to participate in discussions of language issues, or just to listen in. If you would like to subscribe to it, see, I need to change my page here. If you would like to subscribe to the listserv, Talk Indian Oklahoma, the address there is Talk Indian Oklahoma. Send an empty email to talkindianoklahoma-subscribe@yahoogroups.com. And that will automatically sign you up, and you'll start being able to receive the postings. You can also go to yahoogroups.com, and they archive past postings. There will only be postings for November and December so far, but you can go and click on those and read what you've missed if you haven't signed up yet. So as I said, the list was set up just a couple of weeks ago. So far we only have 10 subscribers, but I would invite anyone who's interested in this subject matter to join us online for the Talk Indian Oklahoma listserv. If you'll notice in the address, it's Talk Indian OK. So actually, I guess that's ambiguous. I think it's kind of amusing that you could interpret it as either Talk Indian Oklahoma, which is what I had in mind when I came up with the name for it, but it could also be Talk Indian OK, which is something we want to advocate at the Wordpath Society. So there have been only about 12 messages posted so far as of yesterday evening anyway. So come and join us and either post or listen. Another thing that's come up recently is that there is a man named Willem de Russe, a linguist who specializes in Apachean languages. He used to be located in the Southwest, I believe at the University of Arizona. He's done some research on Navajo and a number of other languages in that family. Now he lives in North Texas, and he was in Norman recently for a talk that he was giving at OU in the Modern Languages Department. He talked about the kind of glimpses you can get into Apachean languages by looking at some old Spanish manuscripts that record contacts between Spaniards or Mexicans and the tribes in Mexico. And a number of the tribes that as American languages we think of belonging to the area of Arizona, maybe Arizona, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas also ranged into the northern area of Mexico. So there are a number of recordings of contacts with them. And he specifically was looking a lot at how people had written down names for the various chiefs, whenever they had these big treaty meetings and all sorts of official meetings with different chiefs and Spanish officials and so forth. They would record everyone who was there. And just by looking at how they spelled in their Spanish orthography, doing the best they could with the names for the Apache chiefs, can shed some light on which kind of Apaches they were dealing with. It's not always clear from the manuscripts exactly what tribe or what language is referred to, but you can look at the names. There are certain names that appear in Lipan and Chiricahua Apache names, where the chiefs have certain words that tend to occur as part of their name, their formal name that they use. And when you look at the spelling of that, you can sort of intuit which dialect of Apache those particular people were speaking, and or which Apachean language, and thereby sort of figure out exactly, get some insight into the history of who was being dealt with that was recorded in this way. And in fact, he's found out that some of these documents are suggestive that there may have been a now extinct dialect similar to Lipan in some ways and similar to Chiricahua Apache in other ways, which was spoken somewhere in the sort of Texas, Arizona area and has since become extinct. Perhaps. There's a lot of hints that may have been the case just from looking at the spelling of some of the words and names that were recorded in the old days. So that was a very interesting talk. Another thing that happened that came up that same week is after the talk, several of us that were in the audience went to have dinner with the speaker and each other. And we learned that Professor John Dunn, who was in the group, has been a professor for a long time in modern languages at OU and is now emeritus, I think, or almost emeritus, sort of on the verge of retiring if he hasn't completely. He does occasionally teach courses still. And we learned that he's going to be offering a course in lexicography, that is dictionary making, at OU in the spring semester. So that would be starting in January, and it will only meet once a week. It's the sort of course, if you have a specific interest in this, you might want to go and enroll as some kind of an auditor or take it for credit or whatever. I believe it was Wednesdays, but do check with the OU Modern Languages department on that and they can give you the details. But it starts in January and it goes through spring semester. So this will be looking, I assume he'll be looking at the ways different people have created dictionaries for different languages and how, if you're working on a dictionary project, get some advice for how to do that. Examine existing dictionaries and work on your own. So I think it could be very useful, interesting and potentially very useful to tribes who are contemplating developing dictionaries of their own in the near future. And especially if, speaking of the tribal people, especially if they have someone to send to the class who has a little linguistics background, I would suspect that there would be some linguistics background required just from knowing who he is. It's kind of a linguistics course, but it's about making dictionaries. So it was exciting to hear about that, and I hope to be able to sit in on that course myself. And speaking of OU, another friend of Oklahoma Indian Languages, Professor Jack Martin, who now teaches at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, will have a visiting appointment there in the spring. I'm not sure which department, but I hear he's coming to Oklahoma for spring semester, so arriving sometime in January, I guess. He's studied various Muskogean languages. He's an old fellow classmate of mine from UCLA from years ago. He's been teaching at William and Mary since, but he studied many different Muskogean languages, and that family includes Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Seminole, and a few others. And he's worked for years with a good friend of mine and our former Wordpath Society board chair, Margaret Malden. He's worked with her on a Creek dictionary, which just came out recently, and several other Creek projects. So I'm sure when he's in town or in the state, he'll be working more intensively with her on whatever their current projects are. They always seem to have 2 or 3 things going. And maybe they'll be in the dictionary class as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see both of them there. But so Jack Martin, Professor Jack Martin will be here in the spring. Let's see, what else? I'm trying to remember interesting phone calls we got in the last week or two. One is that I heard from Geneva Navarro, who's a very well-known Comanche woman, very fluent speaker of Comanche, very knowledgeable. She's been living in Albuquerque for I don't know how long, maybe a couple of decades, quite some time I think, although she's originally from Oklahoma. She's Comanche, a native speaker, and a teacher of Comanche. She's been teaching classes in the Albuquerque area for some time. Well, she's coming home to Oklahoma pretty soon. In fact, she said she'd be moving back sometime in November, so I expect she's here already. I'm telling on her on TV, but I just wanted to mention that because I know she's going to be, it's a piece of interesting news for the Comanche language preservation efforts. She'll be teaching a Comanche class at the Tribal Complex, which is in Lawton, and probably developing a number of other interesting language projects. I hope to be able to work with her on something or other. I think that's about what I can remember that's come up lately. Let me mention really briefly one more little thing, which is that Wordpath Society, in our most recent board meeting, we've been discussing the possibility of having a benefit powwow sometime in the near future. Probably be sometime in the winter, I'm guessing maybe around February, and probably in the Tulsa area. I'll keep you posted on that on the show. Evans Ray Sapehoodle, who's a very well-known Kiowa drummer, lives up not in Tulsa, actually. Where does he live? Hominy, I believe, or somewhere in that area. But he does a lot of language work and drumming and so forth in the Tulsa area and offered to be one of the drums. So we're still trying to put that together. The possible target date would be, let's see, what date is it in February? I believe it's the 21st, which is now International Mother Language Day. I'll get back to you on that and make sure I give you the right date. But we might have it that time or sometime in the winter. And so that's one of our upcoming projects that we're planning, still in the planning stages on. We hope to raise a little more money with that and a little more awareness and do something in the Tulsa area for a change. We have always considered ourselves a statewide organization, but most of our activities, really all of them to date, have been, as far as putting on any kind of event, have been in central Oklahoma, mostly in Norman, in fact. And we do travel around the state to tape things for the Wordpath show and so forth, but it'll be really interesting to have the possibility of putting on a fairly large event up in the Tulsa area and maybe get some more people involved that live up that way. So that's what's been going on lately at Wordpath, and from time to time we'll do a similar segment, the Week at Wordpath, to bring you up to date on just some interesting things that are going on in language work in the state. So I think that's it for tonight, and I'll see you next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita.